Right. All right, naga betseki live stream. Ben seguro na está la live. Oh, yan, está la live. Biba.
Biba.
Fan maguf todos, mentras man la hit. All right.
Are we
All right.
live?
Half a day. Oh, hungan. Go
Okay.
for live. Go for la hit.
I was
Hungan.
waiting for our entrance song.
It's okay. That was when we were going to pre-record it. I was going to use that if we pre-record.
Sabi ko.
Otribay sempre. All right. Half a day. Todos hamzu guano hudzong. 2024. Un nuevo na sakan. It is a new year. A new year for Fanachu. This is officially Fanachu season 8. Imina otsu na sakan. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Fanachu is older than 2 of my children. Hunga.
Biba.
Guo si Michael Lujan Bavacqua. I am the producer and the usual host for Fanachu, but I am so excited to have with me for this first show of 2024, Ipaideku, a fellow member of Independent Guahan, as well as a scholar of our history, an activist in the streets, somebody who represents very hard the village of Inalahan, even though I think he's lived north of Inalahan for quite a while now.
Again.
Si
Shout out. Better do it now.
Ungan si Jesse Chargualaf. Half a day, Jess, half a day.
Half a day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Half a day, Miget. Good to be back on the podcast.
Ungan, Jess Chargualaf is one of the I think you're one of the most frequent guests on Fanachu over the years. And then you are also part of the trinity of longest serving Fanachu patrons. So you, me, and Craig Santos Perez, the poet, we are the longest running patron supporters of Fanachu. And so, but the reason that we are gathered here for this first episode of Fanachu for 2024, though, is that I'm very excited as we enter this new year. We've got some new voices and we've got some new programs. We've got Fanachu is a community show. Those of you who support us on Patreon make it possible for us to do all sorts of interesting, random, important things. Those of you who support us on Patreon make it possible so that me and Akli'i can go out and buy Chamoru vinyl records. And we just found somebody who was selling a few very rare Chamoru records from the island of Saipan. He wanted quite a bit of money for them. But because of the support of Fanachu, we were able to get them. And next week, we are going to start digitizing them and uploading those songs to YouTube so that they are out there. That's what Fanachu makes possible. We also have regular conversations episodes where we get into our history, our current events. We've got Finot Chamorro content where we have regular Chamorro language episodes. For those of you who want to hear people talk about important topics in the Chamorro language, we've committed to doing monthly Finot Chamorro episodes. And so all sorts of stuff. But I'm excited that today we get to talk about the Sångan Session. The Sångan Session with Jesse Chargualaf. And so Jess here is going to be doing in the coming year a regular, semi-regular series called the Sångan Session. And I want to give him a chance now here. This is kind of our first tentative sort of meeting of the Sångan Session. But Jess, what can we expect with the Sångan Session?
Oh yeah, Biba. We're excited to do it. It'll be a monthly segment where we talk about we'll touch base on local current events in the areas of activism and politics. Sometimes we'll have a guest to discuss a particular or a few topics. Maybe someone who could give updates on their own respective activist groups. They might want to discuss recent events that they've held or events that they are planning for. Other times it'll just be a discussion, maybe between me and you, or me and another person. Just updating you all on some events planned, that are going on in the networks. We'll be updating, the viewers of Guam on the political atmosphere, maybe such as initiatives and policies of our elective leaders that might have some bearing on decolonization and political status. or they could be initiatives that address decolonization and political status specifically, or maybe something that addresses areas surrounding decolonization, like environmental protection, sustainability, the military buildup, all of which directly, affect our lives and may influence our path towards our choice of a particular political status. And we want to do this for a couple reasons. We understand we have a good base of local and diasporic viewers. With so much going on all the time, it'd be good to keep track and maybe calendar particular things that people are interested in. We want to, let those in the diaspora know about ways in which they could get involved. And importantly, we want to keep people here on the home front informed and up to date about events, demonstrations, or protests happening here at home, and let them know about ways they can get involved. So that's pretty much the gist of it. And yeah, we're looking forward to doing it. We will be doing it once a month, and we'll see how it goes.
Biba. I love the emphasis on community action and activism. I love that emphasis because, I think a lot of progress has been made in our community in terms of accepting that advocacy and activism is not against the culture or the community, right? I think there's a lot of progress has been made in that regard, but you still get some pushback. You still get resistance. Like, I mean, my favorite, you talked about political status there. My favorite thing ever is people who say, man, this island sucks. Everything's broken. Nothing works. It's terrible. And then people like us, we come in and we say, man, that's why we should change our political status. And they say, oh, no, you can't do that. Everything's got to stay the same. You can't change anything. It's too risky. It's too dangerous. No. But you said everything sucks. Yeah, it does, but we shouldn't change that. We can't risk it. And so I think that's why I'm glad for this first sort of conversation between us to help get this started. We should get into the voices of radicals or activists in the past. And we should think about what it means to be a community activist, right? What does it mean to be somebody who takes on a role of speaking to the community, on behalf of an issue, standing up for something, right? Protesting in the name of something, even if there's, even if you are shouted down, even if there's consequences for what you do. I think it's important to put that in context because sometimes people forget. We say, and so I think that that's a good way for us to sort of get this started. I wanted to, sometimes I hear, people act like Chamorro activism began with somebody like Angel Santos, right? That he was like the first Chamorro activist, or he was like the only Chamorro activist. Sort of, I hear that sort of pretty regularly, but I always want to remind people that actually it goes so much deeper in terms of this tradition of people speaking out and acting in the name of improving things, right? Changing things for the better. So, Pari, you remember when a few years ago
that our natural resources are not going anywhere,
videos started
that
to resurface.
we will not pretend to make this a short process. In fact, it will be a long process. While I understand that land will not go anywhere and natural resources will not go anywhere, but I want the world to know that our people are dying everywhere. I had a dream, and I was dreaming that one day I would be in a place like this to share with the world what the United States is doing to our people back in Guam. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is what we must contend with. We must quit pretending that this problem does not exist.
And so I wanted to, Angel Santos was somebody who was powerful and changed, him and other members of Nation Chamorro changed so much about the texture of our island that a lot of people don't even realize it. I mean, you know, the direct action protests that they took on, doing things that people before them had thought would, you know, could never work, right? Was completely abhorrent to the way people, you know, culture here, blocking entrances to military facilities, squatting on military lands, right? Camping out for days and weeks in the name of something that they believed in.
Mm.
But Anghet was somebody who spoke loudly, spoke clearly and strongly, but he's sort of this idea of Chamorro activism doesn't begin with him and it doesn't end with him.
Got it. Mhm.
And so I feel like I don't know if you've ever felt it, where sometimes I find it when people who study history at a superficial level, they reduce like the civil rights movement to Martin Luther King Jr.
Mm. Yes, no, I gotta say that before studying history and before college, I was probably one of those persons. It wasn't until taking history classes that I learned about all the other stories of resistance in our history. Even during Spanish colonial times, we had people gathering soldiers and speaking eloquently and just garnering support to throw off colonialism. And then, even moving on into other eras of Guam history during the naval times, we saw many acts of resistance. And then, leading up to Angel Santos and then afterwards. So, yeah, no, I agree with that sentiment.
Okay, then what I want for no, Sidus Masi, what I want for us to do today is let's look at some of those voices and let's kind of talk about them. And so what I have here is actually a list of quotes from different sort of Chamorro voices over the years. And it's not an extensive list, but you'll see that it's pretty diverse. There's some people on here where you would expect to find them amongst a list of kind of Chamorro radical or critical voices. And then there's some where you wouldn't expect to see them there. And so let's just talk about some of these. So let's look at the first one here. And this is one which I think a lot of people may not associate Jesus Sablan Leon Guerrero, one of the founders of the Bank of Guam, as being like a radical or an incredibly critical person, but he was. And so he wrote, for example, whatever our political status may be, we should insist that the U.S. consider the value to the U.S. of the military bases and the hazards inflicted upon us in the past and into the future. That's not somebody who says pro buildup, no conditions, just take what you need and throw us the scraps. And so, Hari, what is your response to this?
To the young girl brings up a good point, like something that I think a lot of decolonial conversations might be missing a little bit. Whereas one activist might say that we don't want military bases here anymore. Another activist might talk about negotiating, using the political power of perhaps independence, at the table to negotiate, a fair price for standing at the front lines of U.S. national security. Perhaps we can get something more than food stamps. Yeah, but I think he brings a really good point up. We have a lot of value here as a strategic position, and I think there's a lot of negotiating power with having that. But I believe that it's going to take a solid political status, an actual political status, in order to negotiate for those kind of things.
Pungan, that's actually a good point right there. I mean, and it's something which, just that idea that, what defines an activist, right? Or that it's not necessary that all activists don't say the same thing or believe the same thing, right? And that some people may protest more and others may use different means in order to try to influence change, right? And so there's more diversity there. But man, thinking about this, like, imagine, imagine if you put this quote like on a sign and then held it up at the next protest outside of Camp Blas. Somebody would probably drive by and say, "What radical left-wing piece of shit said that?"
They would.
Yeah, and then you'd be like, "Oh no, he was Jesus Leon Guerrero, who actually supported statehood." So he was somebody, and if you read his autobiography, he was somebody who believed that Guam should become the 51st state. That's why he titled his autobiography Jesus and Little America. Like, he believed that Guam was good enough and that we should be treated equal with the United States. That didn't mean, though, the fact that he believed in statehood didn't mean that he believed we should turn off our critical abilities. The United States, in his mind, still owed Guam and the Chamorro people for what it had done to them in the past. And this is I mean, I wish, man, don't you wish that more of our leaders today kind of thought in this balanced perspective, right? That even if you support the buildup, it should be like, that it needs to be balanced, or there needs to be compensation or negotiation. I mean, don't you wish that more of our leaders sort of had this position?
I wish they would. I mean, I feel like a lot of them have fallen into complacency in regards to ideas like that. Perhaps some of them have a lot of interest in the buildup, or their constituents might have it. But I think for the whole of Guam, if they took that attitude more often, then we might be in a better place, or at least on our way to it. But yeah, I guess that could bring us to our next quote. From Mike Phillips, Attorney Phillips. And he says, "We are condemned as extremists. Christ was an extremist, as were Martin Luther King and Gandhi. Creative extremists are needed to make a change here." And yeah, I guess that really resonates too with maybe the both of us, and maybe some of you listening. But yeah, we get chastised a lot as activists for pushing for things relevant to our safety and to our to a better future for us. And so, Miget, may I have your take on extremists and activists?
Again, this is for some context. This quote comes from the 90s during one of the trials for members of Nation Chamorro who were squatting on military bases, protesting that their land that was taken after World War II should be returned to the families. These were people where and Angel Santos was one of them, that they, the land had been taken from their family for military purposes, and then a good amount of that land was never even used for anything. It just sat behind military fences, or it sat behind no trespassing signs. And then in the late 80s and early 90s, you had this movement to get that land back, where if you're not going to use it, you didn't use it, give it back to us. And man, I was like 10 years old at that time, so I don't really remember much about that particular struggle. And then I know that you're older than me.
By one month and 1 week.
But one of the things that's tricky about this is kind of even how much is our perception of this changed, even though it was just like 30 years ago or something, right? And for me, it's always like, Angel Santos was considered to be like, actually, it's not English, even though I was about to say in English, persona non grata. It was like like he was like public enemy number one in many ways for so many people because of his activism. But what Mike Phillips is reminding us, though, is that actually people like Jesus Christ, si Jesus Christo, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, people that we are told to look up to because of what they did, they were also those who stood up against governments, regimes, empires that they did not agree with. And so the idea that somebody is too extreme is not enough. It's meant to shut things down, to get you to stop thinking about it, right? But in truth, you have to consider, Martin Luther King Jr. had a point, he had a dream, he had a cause that was just. Gandhi, same thing, right? And so I always like to use this quote with people to kind of just remind them that if you are going to trash the person who goes by the side of the road to protest something that they believe is threatening our island, right? Like around the military buildup, or those who have been made landless and go who will go in front of a military base and hold up a sign to protest it and make clear that, this has affected me and this affects our island, this affects our future. If you are going to trash those people, think about where you would have been when Martin Luther King Jr. was talking, or when Jesus Christ was preaching. Think about that. So I find that quote to be so fascinating. Now, I do want to put it out there for those of you who are watching. Send in your comments, send in your questions. Provide your own reflection for some of these quotes here. I'm going to read the next one. We've been talking about Camp Blas, and we should definitely mention what's it called? This is a quote that comes from Ben Blas, who said that his father said it. Why are we equal in war but not in peace? And so he argued, or he wrote in sort of reminiscing on sort of his relationship to his dad's history, because his father was in the Navy at a time in which there was very strict sort of racism and segregation in the United States in the military. And when Congressman Blas, this was when he was a young man before he became congressman, when he left Ireland, when he went to join the Marines, he said that this is what his dad told him. Think about this. Like, why are we equal in war, but we're not equal in peace? I want to hear your reflection on that, Putfabot.
Oh, yeah. I remember him writing about the war and his conversation with his dad in the article Chamoru's Yearn for Freedom, right? And I remember in that article he talks about how that generation, had a particular kind of closeness as they gathered, right? As they took care of each other during the war, and they relied on each other, and I guess relying on each other is what got them through the war. But and then he talked about going into the military, and then about how during this time, reflecting on the quote, why are we equal in war but not in peace? That Chamorro servicemen got exactly 1/2 the wages of their stateside counterparts. So that's a direct, discriminatory act. And I guess just in his words, the quest for decolonization still continues, still ensures and ensues. But they bulldozed burial grounds up at Camp Blas and then named it after him. So, yeah, the quest still continues.
Again, Biba. Hey, I like what you did there. Again, I had wanted to do last year an episode on Ben Blas, sort of just talking about him as a historical figure, because he's somebody who's very important, but he's also somebody where there's layers to his own history and story. Because people would ask me, coming from different ends of the political ideological spectrum, they'd say, man, Ben Blas would be so proud to have this base named for him. Or others would say, they'd ask, would Ben Blas be proud to have this, given sort of what happened in order to create this base? And, the thing is, I think for most of his life, Ben Blas probably would have been incredibly honored beyond words. But I think at the end of his life, especially after he left politics, I think he would have been much more mixed, because that's when he kind of started to embrace more of his identity as a Chamorro and learn and get into his history more and think about things not as a Marine perspective, not as somebody who has been instilled with a desire to be American perspective, but instead, what is it as just a Chamorro from Guam?
Again.
This little place in the sun.
Yeah, and yeah, no, it's just when I first read these quotes, it was surprising, when I learned them a few years back, like how people, even if you love the United States or are proud of being a military serviceman, you can still have these kind of thoughts. You can still advocate for these kinds of things, just just because you might be on that side of the spectrum doesn't mean that you can't still fight for things that you think Guam is being cheated out of. And I really appreciate their comments, and I wonder sometimes if they'd be proud that we are rereading them out here years after they pass.
Oh man, I wonder about that sort of thing all the time. Pungan, I wonder about that because who you are in one moment, it never stays the same. There's always okay, you want to go down to the next one?
Okay, what do we have next here?
Hurrah.
The big one. Magalai Hurrah. So I guess he read this quote or said this during the time after he gathered 2,000 soldiers or as he was gathering 2,000 soldiers and bringing them down to Hagutnya to try to oust the Spanish, and this is during the time of San Vittorius as well, right? So he says they dare to take away our liberty, which should be dearer to us than life itself. They tried to persuade us that we will be happier, and some of us had been blinded into believing their words. But can we have such sentiments if we reflect that we have been covered with misery and illness ever since those foreigners have come to disturb our peace? Ooh, yeah. So, reflection on that one, Miget?
Ooh, this is important to me because every day I go into work and isinanganya harao. Harao's
right.
words are on the front of the building. And so Harao is so important in so many different ways. And even when sometimes people say, oh, Harao's speeches is not real or something like that, that's insufficient. It's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's probably not word for word, but it's definitely informed by what happened and what was known at that time. And then you can tell there's maybe a little bit of embellishment from the priests, who wrote it, for example. But what I love about Harao, though, is that for the longest time, Chamorros were stuck in this colonial matrix in which you had to choose between Kepua or Matapang. You had to be like Kapua, who was like, oh yes, new overlords, take my land, take my life, bury my bones in your ground and don't let my family take them. Like who, the sort of subservient, historically Kepua probably wasn't exactly like that, but this idea that Kepua is the good Chamorro because he recognizes right away that the Spanish are here and that they serve a higher purpose and that you should do what they want and give them what they need. Right. And so, and then on the other end, you have Matapang, who's so cursed that hundreds of years later, when your cousin is like a jackass, you call them Matapang.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or when one of your aunts decides to try to cut everyone out of your grandparents' will and get all the land to herself, she's Matapang.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kind
so go ahead.
No, it's kind of like still happening like that. What's going on here today? We have, people, I support the buildup. I support the United States. They can do whatever they want here. Appeasing to them, thinking that maybe it's gonna be in their best interests if they do that. Welcome them with open arms. And then we have the Matapangs out there like you and like other people holding signs on the side of the road, seeing a bigger picture and fighting for more than just themselves. And so I think those sentiments that you're talking about right now still resonate today, are still a good example.
No, oh, hey, Sidus Masi, for calling me Matapeng, Sidus Masi.
Hunggan.
But I mean, what's great about Harao is, Harao is another option, another path, right? You don't have to be sort of this subservient Chamorro. You don't have to be the enemy of civilization, the enemy of decency. Like Harao was somebody who, and so that's why, like, I think people gravitated towards him. Once sort of his speech was put out there more prominently. Robert Underwood read it into the congressional record when he was in Congress, Harao's speech. When Anne Marie Arceo was creating a school for teaching the Chamorro language, they used Harao, as sort of, because he was somebody who, was stood up for the Chamorro people at that time. And so it's good that nowadays our vision of the past is more expansive. You're not stuck with what the colonizer told you. This is a good Chamorro, that's a bad Chamorro. You don't want to be the bad Chamorro, right? You want to be the good Chamorro. And Harao offers another way. Like Harao is not stuck on either side. But yeah, I'm so glad that I get to work in a place where Harao's words are up there, and they just got painted recently. So there's a lot of weird crap growing on that, and they just got washed and painted, so it looks pretty nice now. So come by the Guam Museum and get your selfies in front of the nicely painted words of Harao at the front.
You have a beautiful job site, yes.
All right, let's do a few more. We have some people tuning in and giving comments. Monica Flores, another friend of Fanachu and sort of one of our friends in Independent Guahan, and somebody who's doing so much great work in the community with different groups. She says, Saina Maasi for bringing focus to our heritage of resistance, protest, voice, and agency, and work for indigenous rights. Hagumas, Sidus Masi put Todu Ibidadamu ki Halami Comunidad Monica, Sidus Masi. And so let's go on to okay, I'm going to give you this one. Uisi, Ricky Bodadzu. Guam is not just a piece of real estate to be exploited for its money-making potential. Above all else, Guam is the homeland of the Chamorro people. That is a fundamental, undeniable truth. We are profoundly Tautautanu, people of the land. This land belongs to us just as surely as we belong to it.
Again. Yeah, nothing I think, or a lot of people think, activates a person more than their homeland being taken, condemned and harmed. I think some of the most vocal activists or just people are those that have had land taken from them. Like those up at Letexen, the Letexen landowners. The land was condemned, I think, in the 60s, and then in the 90s it was supposed to be returned, but instead got turned into a wildlife refuge. And I think recently we just had the 30th anniversary of that refuge, and the landowners didn't really appreciate that, they wouldn't celebrate that, and they shouldn't. So instead we had a protest up there with Hitler Texan, and then landowners like Tun Antonio Sablan, and his story, right, about his mother being forced to sign the deed, and what did he do to I think, was it a Navy a Navy lawyer? He tried to bite him, right? Yeah, and Angel Santos, right? I think that one of his key actions was getting the Chamorro Land Trust into movement, right?
Again.
I stay on Chamorro Land Trust now. I think that was a very important move. And I guess he realized that a lot of Chamorros were, moving into the future, gonna be without land, and he needed to preserve that for us. I think it was, one of the best things ever done for the Chamorro people. And yeah, so land gets people activated.
No, yeah. Ungan, this is a quote that for me, whenever I see this though, because as somebody who studies history, we um you can kind of read it in the moment, and then you can also read it in the larger context of the person, right? And so Ricky Berdalio is somebody who has always fascinated me because towards the end of his life, especially after there was a number of, you know, uh court cases against him, he was convicted of certain things. Some things were overturned on appeal, but he was ultimately supposed to go to prison. And of course, this is the January is the month in which he takes his own life at Kipua, right beneath the statue of Chief Kipua, a statue which he helped erect. And so it's always interesting because, he is the one who helped pave the way for so much, especially so for me and for some people who are more critical, somebody like Chief Kipua is like if I had my choice, I wouldn't put a statue up for Chief Kipua. But for Ricky Berdalio, making that choice in the 70s, it was pretty radical to create a statue like that for a Chamorro figure. It was especially, somebody from that long ago, this is pre-Chamorro Renaissance. This is where the Chamorro Renaissance comes from, is these types of actions that plant the seeds for it. But when I went back and looked at like what Ricky Berdalio actually said in the 70s about why he had chosen Kipua, it was really interesting because part of me, of course, thinks that Kipua was a sellout, but he chose it because he said a lot of things about it. Part of it was because he recognized the church and it's good that Chamorros became Catholics and so on. But he also said it's because that the Chamorro of then, like the Chamorro 300 years earlier, sort of is faced with the outside world and things changing real fast, and that you need people who are going to try to negotiate and figure out a way to make sure that they and their family benefit from it. And so it was interesting because on the one hand, he was saying that actually Kipua was savvy. Kipua was savvy because he recognized the changing times and he wanted to make sure that his family would have a role in this new regime on the island. And so, for Berdalio, it was like, that like Kipua, we should, as globalization happens around us, we need to be ready to find our place in it, whether
Mm.
it's for a particular family or ideally for the island community as a whole.
Yeah, and
But go ahead.
yeah, even then, like talking about how a lot of Chamorros did, they looked out for their families first, of course. But I feel like that kind of attitude back then, for businessmen to have really saved a lot of things tomorrow, like the party system. I feel like, that actually benefited us in the past. Because if it wasn't for that, then we might be getting like shipping in business people, or shipping in businesses, or hiring people from the states to come and do what the party system enabled a lot of people here to be able to do. Um, in the past, I felt the party system was beneficial to Chamorros and maybe actually saved a lot of Guam for Chamorros. But today, yeah, maybe not so much.
You could have yeah, we should have I would love to have a whole conversation about the party system to get into it because but we have another comment and another question that has come in. This is from Donna Dietrich. Hafade Donna, Hafade, a Patreon supporter of Fanachu. See Donna. And then Donna says, thank you for this dialogue. On island, are supporters of the military buildup from a certain age group, or does it come across many age groups? And then also, which status it has the most support of people? Which future political status option? So, Pari, do you wanna how do you feel? So do you think that support for the buildup or opinions on the buildup, break down by age group, or, what do you think?
Um, I I don't think yeah, I would think that maybe more elders would have more support for the military buildup, and because they're still closer to that time of when the US fought for Guam and reclaimed the island, and a lot of people were happy about that back then, and of course they should have been. Today I think more people involved in the community activism, and more people who are critical of the buildup are people of the younger generations. But then again, like, I'm seeing also a shift where, as like, I was thinking that we're being more influential on even younger generations, that there might be another shift back to supporting ties with the United States. And I'm not really sure how to work it out. I think it's just an ever-changing, ever-evolving environment. And yeah, we just keep doing what we can.
Again, I definitely, you're right that different generations have different sort of general ideas and opinions about these sorts of things, right? I mean, one thing that I've noticed, and this is for me one of the reasons why I feel younger people are more open, is because younger people have a greater sense of the way the world can be, that the world doesn't just have to be one way, right? It doesn't have to only be the American way, because actually there's ways that other countries might do it, and it might be better, it might not be better, but just that feeling where it could be different, and that's okay. It might be better actually if we did something different. I mean, I remember yesterday I saw a few people on Facebook arguing back and forth about healthcare being so expensive on Guam. And one person basically said to the other, well, you want independence, which means, what is healthcare going to be like, without the United States? And then the other person responded and said, dude, we're a US territory. That's why healthcare is so damn expensive here. Like, healthcare is not like this around the world. This is it's a very interesting American problem, that of way too expensive healthcare. And so, but yeah, I think too, for the older generation, the military had a certain cash, it had a certain sort of aura around it. Younger people still see the military as having opportunities, but not with the same aura. Like, not this idea that, well, you just have to bring as much military as possible and then the island will get better. Younger people are able to kind of be more open to seeing the military in a different way. And I think that is one thing that encourages more of them to kind of protest or speak out. Oh, hey, we've got another question. This is from Troy Uggan. Hey, Hafa Day, Troy. Again, Troy from the Learn Tomorrow project. Hafa Day. He wants your thoughts, Pari, on those who support radicals and activists, but are on the sidelines in their own quiet way. Like, they share information and activities, and they do other things to bring the community together. What are your thoughts on those who may not go out and protest, but show their own quiet ways of supporting that which activists do?
Yeah, no. That's much appreciated, and maybe those are some of my favorite supporters are the quiet ones. But yeah, no, and that's totally fine. I think a lot of the times, like, my biggest peeve comes from, of course, those not on the sideline, right, opposing things like decolonization. And I think just being someone on the sidelines, supporting in their quiet ways, and then finding out that you are one of those people and not knowing it before because you were silent, it's a breath of fresh air, like it reminds me that there are a lot of people out there who aren't, saying anything or aren't out there holding signs, but do support it. And that's like, just finding that out, restores faith and hope that we are making a difference. And it's always nice to hear somebody says they support us when or support these issues when you didn't know that before. So says they support us when
Good. I think
appreciated.
Again, Part, can you turn your radio down? Not so like it's like you're calling into K57. But what you said there, Hungen, it's important. I think one of the things to remember is that, that those who go out and protest, they bring attention to issues. They make it so that issues cannot be hidden, that there's less chance of there being silence on a critical issue. But one of the things, I guess, that Debrita Hasu and I, we have to remember is that like a protest doesn't convince a lot of people necessarily. Not unless there's a lot of sweeping sort of changes that are happening around that masses of people go out, and then it might cause a big, huge shift in attitudes. But normally, if it's just kind of a regular day, like a Biba Betness, there's a protest on an issue out there, it may not convince a lot of people, right? But so that's why those who quietly support can be just as important. But you have to find a way that if you believe in something, that you do your own part to help make it happen, right? So, because I mean, for example, one of the anecdotally, one of the best stories that I've heard for how elders get convinced about protests is that they see protesting or activism is that they see people protesting in public and then they criticize it. And then like a grandchild then talks to them about it because the grandchild is supportive or sympathetic, but they don't want to like tell their grandpa, you're stupid, or, something like that. But then they just talk about it and they use it as a chance to try to get their thoughts to be kind of opened up a little bit more about it. That's key. That's so key. But find something. I always tell people like think about the balangay na or the kuput higay in the past. So you've got lots of roles, right? You're gonna thatch a roof. Not everybody is good that they can go up there and get on the rafters and tie or nail down the thatch to the roof, right? Because I mean, in the past, there didn't used to be like 300-pound Chamoros. There's a good number of 300-pound Chamoros today. You don't want to be on that roof. You've got another role to play. Maybe you can be helping prepare the thatch. Maybe you can be cooking the food for lunch. Maybe you can be getting the beer or the pugwa for everybody. So not everyone needs to be visible and up there doing the hardest work itself. But what is your role to support? What is your role in supporting the larger goal? And you don't have to be out there posting about it, protesting about it, but you got to find some way though to show your support.
Hungen, find your own style of activism. Like I think there's a lot of people do that even just in their jobs or the job that they choose. Like like my history professor, right? Dr. Anna Tori, she's a poet and she's a lecturer, but she's not out there holding signs, right? But I feel like she had one of the most effective ways to activate people, which was just teaching history. And then, you find that too, like in other, occupations, like even, farmers, and bringing back those kind of practices, I think are very effective forms of activism too. So, yeah.
Again, this has been a Sidus Masi for everyone who has chimed in and for everyone who has watched. We were gone for a few weeks, so it's good to be back with Fanachu. Now, just, this is going to become a regular series for you. The format might be a little bit different next time. So, remind us again about some of your plans for the Sångan Session, as we close this episode.
Again, so every month, I think we'll stick with maybe the first Wednesday of every month. we'll be here updating you guys on the political atmosphere in relation to decolonization, and also upcoming activism events, protests, demonstrations, or things that people have planned. And yeah, so we'll do that once a month, and hope you'll be able to join us. And thanks for having me again, Miget.
Hey, Hago mas, pare. Si Jus masi no hamzu todos. What I'll do later on today is I'm gonna put some of the quotes into the comments for those of you who missed the live stream, so you can check them out, because we went over some great quotes from different sort of leaders in our history, community leaders, political leaders, economic leaders, sharing critical thoughts. And so who agradece how Jess, Pari, who agradece how who agradece hamzo todos ni umeiga para umee kung okesti na episode Fanachu y primer na episode Fanachu para 2024. Si Diyos masita lo a Diyos, esta aquí.